welcome to another episode of Iconic Freedom, the Formula. We are setting the standard for accountability and responsibility, the ownership of your choices and the consequences for those choices. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for.
I also want to close with one message to the Democrat Party. End this farce that Joe Biden is going to be your nominee. We know he's not even the president of the United States. He's a puppet for the managerial class. So have the guts to step up and be honest about who you're actually going to put up so we can have an honest debate. Biden should step aside, end his candidacy now so we can see whether it's Newsom or Michelle Obama or whoever else.
All right,
just tell us the truth so we can have an honest debate.
Ambassador.
He is visibly in better physical shape than Donald Trump.
Biden is out riding a bike. He's swimming in the ocean. He's, 80-year-olds, can do all those things.
Joe Biden is in far better shape physically. Joe Biden is physically active. He's on a bike.
He literally answered the one question. Is he old enough? Is he strong enough? He was on fire. He's fiery Joe.
I'm excited for the American people to get to see President Biden on the campaign trail, get to see what I get to see behind the scenes all the time about his energy.
One of the themes this election cycle is that Joe Biden is too old to lead. And so everyone is seizing upon this. And it is a classic disinformation tactic.
This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
He is sharp.
There's a lot of ageism there. More wild speculation from a bunch of people who have probably never been in a room with Joe Biden.
Have you heard any concerns from anyone who has met with President Biden about him seeming a little slower?
And off to the races we go. So this has been, since the debate that happened on the 27th, which was actually 30 days ago. And, the news cycle has been on a trajectory that even I would not have been able to predict. I mean, it's been absolutely amazing. I see people sometimes on social media, they're like, I feel exhausted because there's stuff coming at you so quickly. So what I want to focus on for this particular podcast is about exposing the lies. Exposing the media lies. What is important about that? What's important about it is piggybacking off of, so many other podcasts, but last week where we talked about doing your research. What we're going to see, over, the next few months is a lot of information coming at you, a lot of sound bites. And what is rightly pointed out is that the media has lied to you. We talked about cognitive dissonance, where trying to hold two conflicting ideas at the same time. Are you supposed to believe your eyes and your ears, or are you supposed to believe something that somebody is telling you, which confuses a situation? There's, a lot of times people can do this very subtle thing where, actually a friend was talking about this a while back, and I thought this might be a good example. I've seen it a lot in my industry where somebody is sending you an email, and it seems like a very aggressive email, just in the languaging that they use, or maybe they're using, multiple, exclamation points or something. And then when they see you in person, they're like, all syrupy sweet, oh, hey, did you get my email? And blah, blah, blah. But therein lies the cognitive dissonance. It's like, okay, am I supposed to know what was in that email was reality, or what's in front of me is reality? And anyone who has a congruence in their personality, their integrity, it's going to be the same in an email as it is on the phone, as it is on a voicemail, as it is in person. If you are thinking to yourself when you read an email, what's up with that? Sure, you have to check yourself to make sure that you're not in an emotional state, that you're not reading into something. Maybe you have a disagreement with that individual, or, somebody you don't particularly like, or you don't feel like they have integrity, all those things. So you have to check yourself on that first. Then you have to see what the reality is. and then see what the pattern of that individual is, because that will help you in understanding whatever that cognitive dissonance is. Well, when you start exposing the lies of other people, and in this case, the media, politicians, certain political parties, you have to be looking at what is the pattern of the behavior. So I posit to you that the pattern of the behavior from one side is that they circle the wagons, they start trying to push a narrative your way, they overwhelm the system with that narrative to the point where everybody's basically using the same language, even the same wording, and they keep pushing it out and amplifying it to the extent that it could overwhelm the system, right? And then all of a sudden, if it gets out there, as we've talked before about that crossing that threshold of critical mass, then everybody, knows it in that sense. But what if what everybody knows is a lie? We talked a few weeks ago about the investigation into the Matthew Shepard issue that was going on with Laramie, and how they had debunked it, basically, that it was all a lie. But they had pushed out the narrative, right? They had pushed out the story, and what they did was they hooked people emotionally. This is something, and I even said this last week, that the language of logic needs to be implemented. More and more logical expression of the individual. Things that are you're thinking of, that you know, and that we stop believing things because we stop emoting. When we get into that place of emoting everything and then trying to use that as factual information, again, it confuses people. So we have to clean that up. So you clean it up for yourself, right? And then as you kind of move through your life, in essence, you're kind of the example to other people. And if enough of us are doing this, then we're bringing clarification, we're bringing a clear idea to conversation, and we're making it very succinct about what is actually happening in reality. Because that's always the endeavor, is reality. Speak to the reality. Speak to the reality. Speak to the reality. So what we saw happening with the media over the last 5 years plus, is that they were not speaking to the reality. They were actually lying. And so they were lying to an unsuspecting public, many of whom are, very good people that have, good nature within them. We know this from what we see and observe. Not everyone, but quite a few. Americans are very good and very generous in that nature, and media taking advantage of their good nature. You can actually see this pattern that starts developing way back when. I want to say 50, 60, maybe even beyond that, years ago, where people were very trusting and didn't have in their minds that others were liars and cheaters, and that they would do something awful. I just saw a thing on Instagram where this guy went in and was asking for some food or something, I can't remember what it was, and said that he wanted to order dozens and dozens of something. I'm paraphrasing the story. And the woman says, "Oh, wow, that's quite a bit." He goes, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to give it to a homeless shelter." And she's like, "Oh, wow, okay, well, hold on just a minute." She goes and get the boss, who comes back and says that he's not going to charge this guy for all this food that they're preparing for him. And then the next clip is this guy sitting wherever, sitting there eating all of it, talking to the public, saying that, in essence, look what I got away with. So that is the aspect of taking advantage of the good nature of people, that they want to do something kind, they want to do something generous. Are those individuals, are they virtue signaling? I don't know. I'd have to talk to these people more to find out more about what they're doing. But when people are unsuspecting and they're doing things because they want to do something out of the generosity of spirit that they have, and then people take advantage of it, then there can be quite a reckoning when people find out that they're lying. I would be very interested to know what the owner or manager of that particular outlet was when he found out that this guy cheated them. I'm sure it wasn't good. So I bring it back now to everything that's been going on the last 5+ years or so, where you're watching what we just saw about our President Biden, and how his cognitive decline was always there and that it was going to get worse and worse. Anyone that researches dementia, they understand all of these things. They understand that it will get worse over time, and it did for him as well. And it culminated into what happened 30 days ago when there was a debate, and then everything, kind of blew up, and the media acted like they were shocked. And it's like, how can you be shocked about something that you were the ones that were the propagators of? You propagated the idea that he was mentally fit, able to do these things. I mean, they're sitting there talking about, he's riding a bike, he's, out on the water, at one point, I think, who was it? I think Kellyanne Conway said, he's a trapeze artist in the background, and nobody seems to know it. But the idea is that you have to pay attention to what's being said and what's being done, and then you match those two things up to see, are those things cognitively dissonant? Are they congruent? Do they equal reality? Because what is reality? It is something without emotion. So you have to look at something and be able to say, this is without emotion.
Biden's answers were, in a lot of cases, not coherent.
He did nothing to disabuse, I think, the country of the notion that he is very old and was lost frequently.
His biggest issue that he had to prove to the American people was that he had the energy, he had the stamina, and he didn't do that.
It's kind of a DEFCON 1 moment.
That was painful. I love Joe Biden. I work for Joe Biden. He didn't do well at all. He did not do well at all.
The only job that Joe Biden had last night was to reassure America that he was not too old to do the job. And he failed.
I was disappointed to devastated by Joe Biden's performance last night.
I don't believe he's our best choice at this point.
Very bad night for Joe Biden. Deep, a wide, and a very aggressive panic in the Democratic Party.
It's kind of a DEFCON 1 moment.
President Biden needs to step down for humanity, for his integrity, and for his legacy.
There are going to be discussion about whether he should continue.
The universal reaction was somewhere approaching panic.
Conversations range from whether he should be in this race tomorrow morning to what was wrong with him.
That was painful. I love Joe Biden. I work for Joe Biden. He didn't do well at all.
A lot of people have resting 25th Amendment face.
And here's an image Democrats don't want you to see. First Lady Jill Biden escorting her husband off the stage.
So this is a rarity.
Night.
How often do you get a hoax debunked before 50 million people?
Mm-hmm.
What we saw was one of the greatest hoaxes of all time, that Joe Biden was mentally fit. It got completely blown out of the water to everybody. The debunking of the Biden hoax opens your eyes, your ears, and your mind to the overwhelming possibility that they're lying to you about everything. We're starting to see the pattern. I mean, you look at Jan 6th, the Fine People hoax, COVID, DEI, immigration, inflation. The curtain has gotten pulled back, and the real cheap fake was this Democrat media machine. I go back to that question I posed every day last week, I think. If Trump is an existential threat, why are you pitting the weakest, frailest candidate in history against him? That question was posed last night on every show. There is more to this than we know. They tried to hide his health, and it raises the question, what else are they hiding? What else are they willing to hide?
It can't be overstated enough that when you're paying attention to all the signal and not the noise in life, that in order for you to have clarity on what's going on, there has to be an ability to separate, to compartmentalize, quarantine, if you will, the emotion that may still be in you or gets triggered in a situation and the logic and reality that is presenting itself to you in that moment. So one way, of course, that you have to go through this process is that you start developing your own accountability and responsibility, right? We're back to our mantra, back to our theory, and back to filtering everything through that prism, is that you have to accept your choices. And you have to accept the choices of any given situation that you have placed yourself in. If you're a person that has placed yourself in a situation where you believe everything that the media says to you, or you hear a soundbite and you take that verbatim, then you have to own it if it turns out to be bunk. This past week, there was a person on X that was posting out there about Joe Biden's health. And it was going pretty viral. I mean, several million, I think probably close to 10 million. And then somebody later on said, how many clicks did that person get? And then we saw Biden on TV. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all bunk, but you still have to be skeptical when you're reading things. And as I was texting it to my friends, I was saying, we'll see what happens. She seems to be pretty credible as a reporter, but hey, you never know. You just don't know what's going on and what a person's trying to do. It goes back to self-interest, right? So what is that person's self-interest? What was the media's self-interest in lying to everybody and to keeping that hoax going? And as Gutfeld, from one Greg to another, as Gutfeld had pointed out, what are they lying about? What won't they lie about? And you have to look at the relationships in your life that way. And we're not really talking about trying to get into people's heads and kind of figure out what their motivations are, but it's just in the observation of their choices. So when you, in essence, polish this for yourself, and you're able to know for yourself all of your self-interest in all of the choices that you're making, and in knowing those two things and make your choices and having all accountability for all of the choices you're making and having all of the responsibility to all of those choices, you see how the pattern goes? Once you kind of figure it out for yourself, then you almost have like a decoder ring, because everything that winds up going through the filter of your reality is of integrity. And why is it of integrity? Because there's an ownership of not only the motivation and the self-interest, but of the choice that's made and the responsibility of that choice, that ability to respond to that choice. When all of those things are cleaned up, these things that are going on in media and politics and other people at your workplace or your friends or family, all of those things come into focus. And all of a sudden, it takes on a new understanding, a new clarification that what you thought at one time was the reality was not the reality. Because you're seeing things unfold and get exposed. You're seeing the exposure of the lies and how those lies impacted you. And again, it's not a right or wrong, good or bad thing, but you just have to be able to see that whatever that person was doing and whatever you did as a response to that, you have to own it. Now, if you go back and you realize that person lied and you made a choice in the face of that lie, okay, that's not a big deal, no problem, right? No regret. You just, okay, great. Bless it, and on you go, and you figure it out for the next time. But you continue to tweak and polish and really bring clarification to the reality that you know is there for you, because it's a life without all of this emotion, but a life with all kinds of harmony, because you see things as they are. You don't engage in the things that are lies. You don't engage in the things that are, cognitive dissonance. You don't need to, because you can see the reality. So circling back to the historical frame of reference from the very beginning of this podcast, where you were watching the video of Vivek, who was on the stage at a Republican debate, and it was last year sometime, and I don't really remember when. But, I mean, he was calling it out at that time. Quite a few people were doing that. I'm still not sure that I understand why people do that all the time. They're like, oh, I warned you, or I told you, or I called it. And it's just like, okay, so what? It's like, what do you want a medal? It's just like, who cares? It's like, what is your self-interest in having to do that? Do you think you're like prescient and somebody, everybody should give you credulity over everything that you say? It's very weird behavior that people do. But circling back to that, in the idea of understanding that when people start exposing the lies, then it's an opportunity for you to recalibrate, because now all of the people that have watched all the lies prior about how great and grand Biden was, and then to see his cognitive decline, and then to see people respond to it. And, whether it's genuine or not, I don't know. I don't really care. What I have a self-interest in is exposing the reality, exposing the lies. How do I do that? I push out the reality by doing a podcast like this, putting clips in there so you can see what actually happened. Some people didn't see any of this past week, which is completely fine, right? But the idea is that you can go to different sources and you can find this information, and you can do your research like we talked about last week. As we go through this awakening, where every week we're talking about another subject, we're kind of putting the spotlight on something, and then like a magnifying glass, we're looking at it and examining it. The idea is to keep looking at these things, keep building upon the information that you keep educating yourself about and the decisions that you make. It's really an interesting thing that in the aggregate, when you start looking back at the last month, at the last 6 months, at the last couple of years, you start to see for yourself, wow, things have really shifted for me. And what is that about? It's about the fact that this change, this awakening happens moment by moment, and it aggregates over time. Slow and steady, right? Like the wind that blows over sand and, creates the mountain, all those kinds of metaphors. That's how this happens. And, at the end of the year, all of a sudden you look back and you think, wow, I'm in a much different place than I thought I was at the beginning of the year. And if that place is more reality, which brings more accountability and responsibility in your life, I guarantee you it brings you more harmony in your life. I'm going to end with this last clip from Gutfeld, his take after that debate, because I thought it was hilarious.
So how bad was Joe at the debate last night? It was so bad that Joy Reid lost more hair. It was so bad, Jimmy Carter watched the debate and said, wow, that guy's almost dead. It was so bad, Hillary's already writing her acceptance speech and Joe's suicide note. It was so bad, Nancy Pelosi's face unfroze. Joe was so bad, Vladimir Putin denied poisoning him. It was so bad, Joe Biden thought St. Peter was the moderator. That's good. All right. Not done. We're not done. It was so bad, Joe Biden thought he saw his dead relatives, and his uncle asked, why did you say I was eaten by cannibals? It was so bad, Democrats were seen in California at a cemetery digging up Dianne Feinstein. It was so bad, Anthony Fauci blamed it on bat soup. It was so bad, Rachel Levine transitioned to a Republican. It was so bad that a CNN poll found that 67% of voters believed Trump had won. The other 33% thought they were watching the first episode of Dead Apprentice. It was so bad, Jerry Nadler put his colostomy bag at half-mast. It was so bad that Andrew Cuomo put himself in a nursing home. It was so bad that ABC sent grief counselors to The View, and the cast ate them. Finally, it was so bad that even Kamala Harris is worried that Kamala Harris might be president.
And on that note, we are going to end this podcast for this weekend. Hey, thanks so much for joining me. I hope you got something out of this today. If you did, share it with your family and friends. You don't know how it might help them as well. Hit that like button if you would. And if you'd like to subscribe to the podcast, you can do that. Get my book as well. All those links are down below. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for. See you next week.